So today we are covering the Durin. And it's for those of you who know, we've covered these guys in the past, but I maintain my position on that these guys pretty much play fantasy football politics. That they like to sort of give their thoughts and opinions. They like to have um, guests on that they don't really challenge, who share their views. They're very pro-Russia, not too surprisingly. But today they're making some weird, weird accusations, saying that the privilege committee that went after Boris Johnson was very 1984, and that this privilege committee was wrong in the way that it did it. And I have to say, this angle of attack, I haven't seen this. This is quite funny because it points out these guys don't have a clue what they're talking about when it comes to this, which again is my whole point on the Durin, that these guys don't have the first clue when it comes to talking about politics. That they like to just say, this is how we think are, to the point where they're accusing the entire privilege committee of being something from like 1984. Because, right wingers love 1984, but I've never seemed to have read 1984, but there you go. So yeah, we're going to cover these guys because honestly, what we're about to hear, and like I say, we're going to go through it. We're going to stop. We're going to pause it constantly. So this might be a very long video. So strap yourselves in. Go get yourselves. Pause it now. Go get yourselves a cup of tea. Listen to it into the background. But oh boy, this is. Yeah, this is something. this is certainly something. I can tell you that now. So, but before we do go on to covering these guys, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, leave a link down below. I've left a link down below to my Patreon page, the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There's the YouTube thank you button. And of course, there's a pony club as well, which you can join. And of course, feel free to leave your comments down below, as always. So, let's crack on into this then, shall we? So, obviously, this has just been the privilege committee. They're covering what has happened, what's gone on. And yeah, we are about to hear some interesting claims. And just for clarity, I have sped this up a bit, just so that we can get through this just a bit quicker.
Alexander, let's talk about what's going on in the UK. Now, you've got a lot of information of some recent news that is happening, but I think all of this news revolves around, in one way or another, Boris Johnson and this big paper, 506-page report dropped, I think, on Friday. And it says that Boris
dropped on Thursday, but never mind.
Johnson is a super duper liar. I mean, that's what all the papers are running with. He lies, and lies.
Yes.
So what's going on here?
Who'd have thought it? I mean, Boris lying? I mean, I'm sure that never crossed anybody's mind before. I mean, this report is a nonsense. Now, there's lots of reasons.
I love it. Straight away into that. Oh, like, they're saying, Johnson's a liar. We all knew he was a liar. And then he immediately launches into, this paper's all nonsense. What? We went over this report on a live stream. Now, we didn't go over it all because it's a long report. We covered sort of the intro, the summary, and picked out some of the good parts that we went over. But we were spending, I think, almost 3 hours going over that paper. And it had all their reasoning, all the evidence. There's the Sue Gray report that also feeds into this as well. The idea that this report from the Privilege Committee is just complete nonsense goes to show you they have an agenda. They don't really care about what the Privilege Committee report actually said, because, as I've said before, I think this Privilege Committee did an absolutely fantastic job of covering all this. This is, I think, restored a lot of people's faith in politics. I really do hope that has been the case. This has sort of restored people's faith in politics. The fact that it has shown Boris Johnson not only just lied, but he lied about lying. He lied about correcting the record. And, you know, he committed contempt of parliament, which is a very serious offence for an MP to do. And of course, it's not jail time, it's suspension time. And the 90-day suspension, which they will get into in a moment, shows how seriously they took this. And I think it just goes to show you they were throwing the book at Johnson. But we'll get more into this, I'm sure, later in the video.
Reasons to be very angry with Boris Johnson. I mean, I'm going to be careful what I say. I mean, I am not a fan of Boris Johnson by any conceivable measure, but he's done lots of terrible things as Prime Minister. Partygate was hardly amongst the most serious, to be frank. I'm not saying it's unimportant. I mean, you know, the fact that they were holding parties in Downing Street while arresting and fining people across the rest of the country for breaching the regulations that they were ignoring. I mean, that's pretty shocking. I mean, that's
another thing, again, I think it's worth bringing up is how deeply this has actually penetrated into the public consciousness, because this whole Partygate saga has broken through in a way that I don't think anything else has really broken through about the stories of Boris Johnson. And I think it's because it affects people in so many personal ways, because they weren't able to go see their loved ones during lockdown, or they missed funerals, or they weren't able to go to the hospital, all kinds of stuff. So it affected everyone up and down the country. Everyone has their story about what happened to this. And to see that you had the guy who was on television saying, you need to follow these rules because we're trying to protect everyone. We're trying to make sure the country gets, you know, is keeping running, that, you know, the people don't die. You need to follow these rules. So it sends a large message when you've got someone like Boris Johnson who did not follow those rules. And that's why Partygate, he says, oh, I don't think it's that serious. No, it was very serious.
That's awful, actually. But the traditional way in which you deal with things like that in Britain is through the political process. The opposition.
So just remember what he said. The traditional way that we deal with this is through the political process. The entire privilege committee was set up through our political process. It was voted on to be done by Parliament. Parliament set this up.
Opposition makes hay of this. They say the Prime Minister is a hypocrite, that he's a liar, and all of those kind of things. And it loses him votes in the election. And the other thing that they say is, well, that he lied about it to the House of Commons, as if Prime Ministers have never told lies in the past to the House of Commons. They often.
Again, he's making light of what actually happened. Here's the thing. Yes, there have been times where prime ministers may not have necessarily told the truth, but they didn't necessarily outright lie. And here's the thing. Boris Johnson was directly accused of lying to Parliament. And if that happens, you have what is parliamentary privilege, which is why it's called the Privilege Committee, set up to look at Boris Johnson's privilege of, did he lie to Parliament? Did he mislead the House in his statements? Because if that happens to an MP, you are expected to correct the record. And Boris Johnson did not correct the record. In fact, as we said earlier, he lied about correcting the record. And this is just how serious this goes. The fact that you have had someone who is the Prime Minister who has lied, misled the House, should be seen as a very serious offence. If you do not take this seriously, what Boris Johnson has done, then, as I accuse the Durham all the time, they play at fantasy politics. They do not really engage in politics. They're just doing this for show. If you do not think that this is serious, then you probably shouldn't be covering politics, guys. I'm sorry.
And have done. Now, what has happened is that instead of using politics, democratic politics, to sort all this out, we now have this privileges committee.
We did use politics to sort this all out. This entire privilege committee was set up by Parliament. We live in a representative democracy. I think this guy, Alexander, lives in the UK. He should know the UK is a representative democracy. We elect representatives and then they take care of all the politics. Now, you may have seen not voted for your representative, but of course, again, they are expected to represent you, even if you aren't a member of their party. It was Parliament that voted on this privilege committee to set it up and get it underway. This was part of our democratic process. So the very fact that he is saying, oh no, this was completely done anti-democratically, as I seem to think the argument he's making, that's oh boy, oh, that's just a weird argument to make. It's not just a weird argument to make. It's completely factually wrong. And I think you can see the title of this video is UK 1984. This is set up to be very, very conspiratorial.
Committee, headed by Harriet Harman, who's a Labour MP, a Labour politician, close to Starmer, very antagonistic to Johnson.
Voted in by
There's a
Parliament.
Conservative majority in this committee, but it is handpicked by the government, in other words, by Rishi Sunak.
No, it wasn't. This committee was not handpicked by Rishi Sunak. That is wrong. That is wrong. It was not handpicked by Rishi Sunak.
And what they're saying is that a official that behaves like Johnson did should be suspended for 90 days from the House of Commons. And of course, I discussed before that that would have opened the way for a by-election in his constituency, and most likely, at least the expectation was that he would lose the by-election.
Again, that's true.
And cease to be an MP. But think about it. What's happening?
But he did miss a step out because it's not automatically triggering a by-election. There is a step before that. What you would have is a recall petition. If that petition reaches the required number, then it triggers a by-election. And would they have triggered that recall petition? Potentially. I still think they would have triggered to reach those numbers, triggered a by-election. I don't think this has been a by-election that Boris Johnson would have won. So he would have basically lost his seat in the House. And that is something where a lot of people have said why Boris Johnson quit, because he didn't think he could win that particular by-election. And of course, he avoids a lot more further scrutiny, but also the fact that they took away his ex-MP pass. So now he can't come back into the House of Commons whenever he wants to do who knows what, to be honest. But I think it's a very, very suitable punishment, to be honest. I think the 90 days is very justifiable, given the fact that you had multiple contempts of Parliament with all the evidence laying it out, and the fact that they said, look, we've had this committee has been constantly being attacked. It is undermining the democratic process. And we now believe that Boris Johnson is the primary culprit for all that. So they are throwing the book, and we even read it on the statement on the stream. They are really throwing the book at Boris Johnson because they wanted to set, I think, a clear example. Because you do not want other people repeating what Boris Johnson did or being, Boris Johnson light. And that's why I think they punished him so severely. Remember, this committee is entirely made up of majority conservatives. Yes, it's led by Harriet Harman, but she doesn't get a vote because she's the chairman. And remember, it was majority conservative MPs that were on that committee. So questioning this very idea that this committee is bogus or this report is nonsense, that undermines the very concept of our democracy. And now you have to question, why is this guy undermining this so much?
happening is you're now getting an establishment committee introduced into and taking over the political electoral process.
I don't even get that argument. You're introducing an establishment committee to take over the election process? Does this guy understand how MPs get punished? That if you get suspended for more than 10 days, this could potentially trigger a recall election, which can be called by your local, in this case, the local Conservative Party. If it reaches the required numbers, it would trigger a by-election. At what point are you taking the electorate out of that equation? Because that local electorate would be very much engaged with that by-election. And like I say, that area represents their MP. Boris Johnson was no longer prime minister by that point, long gone. But the idea that it's taking the electorate out of the equation, he doesn't know what he's talking about.
So it's no longer the electorate that decides which politicians they want to lead them through votes in elections.
Yes. You've just said it. It would trigger a by-election. The voters of Uxbridge would be able to choose whether or not Boris Johnson would be able to continue to represent them. He doesn't understand how our system works. He doesn't understand how our system works, full stop.
It's committees picked by the government, which...
It was not picked by the government. It was picked by Parliament. There is a very crucial difference there. A very crucial difference.
Take that place instead. Now, that's already very bad. But something that...
No, it's not. No, it's not. Because the people of Uxbridge would have had a choice. Do you want to continue with Boris Johnson representing you as an MP? That is politics. That is democracy. That is how our system works. That is not the establishment taking the electorate out of politics. This guy has no idea what he's talking about.
Is even worse is that this committee says, that one of the reasons why Johnson deserved a 90-day suspension is because he showed no real regard for this committee and didn't cooperate with it fully and all those kind of things. And
yeah, he didn't cooperate with the committee. They gave him every opportunity. It's in the report. They gave him every opportunity to produce evidence, to have their say, but he didn't. When he got the report, instead of writing his own response to the committee, he went to the press, which basically then made them go, well, at this point, we've got to release the report. He's chosen instead of to come back us and to deal with this, privately with us and all this stuff. Instead, he has chosen to go straight to the press and to sort of almost publish what was in our report. So, yeah, of course they threw the book at him.
They say that this is contempt of Parliament. Contempt of Parliament is a very serious thing, but it's never, as far as I know, extended to criticising a committee. And they're not...
Okay, you are allowed to criticise the Privilege Committee. There is nothing. No one is saying you are not allowed to criticise the committee. What they are saying and what they said in the report is that Boris Johnson and his allies were using very politically charged language, calling us a kangaroo court, which at that point undermines the democratic process and it undermines our belief in institutions. That is committing contempt of Parliament. And yet this guy's laughing it off. This guy who is, or this channel that's meant to take politics very, very seriously, he doesn't even know what he's talking about. He doesn't even seem to understand the system that he's talking about, thinking that this committee somehow removes the electorate from the choice. No, the people of Uxbridge would have had a choice in the by-election, which he stated would have been triggered.
Not only saying that criticism by Johnson of this committee is contemptuous, they're saying that other MPs, Conservative MPs, who are allies of Johnson and who have also criticised this committee, are in contempt of Parliament as well. And they too could be subjected to disciplinary action. And they too could be suspended from the House of Commons. And they too could face by-elections and be removed from Parliament.
Could face by-elections if the committee suspends them. Now, remember, they would be attacking a legitimate committee, accusing it of being kangaroo court, saying that this entire committee was stitching Johnson up, trying to get rid of him. They have no evidence for that to back that up. The vote on Johnson was unanimous. Harriet Harman did not have a vote because she was chairman of the committee. The idea that you would say and news go out and not the committee not say, look, if you use this politically charged language against us, you might have to face repercussions. That is, again, part of our politics, that if you do that, if you undermine it, this institution that was set up by Parliament, this committee was set up by Parliament to investigate Boris Johnson, then at what point can MPs be punished? At what point can they be taken action? Oh, it's got to take place at the election every 4 years. That is nonsense. That is pure nonsense.
As a result. So what is happening? I said before, this is a purge. This clearly is a purge. And
Boris Johnson did not get purged. There was an entire committee where he could give evidence, he could give his side of the story. And remember, when we watched the Privilege Committee live, there was one of the Conservative MPs towards the end who was going, so after all this stuff has been said, after all this stuff, challenging on this, would you like to correct the record? And I think he asked him about 3 or 4 times to Boris Johnson, would you like to correct the record? And he did not correct the record. He is still, as Boris Johnson, as far as concerned, he did nothing wrong, and is confused by the concept that he's even being held to account for his actions. This is not a purge. This is our democracy in action. And yet, it's clearly a purge, according to the Duran, a home for apparently serious topics of conversation. No, this Alex guy doesn't know what he's talking about. In fact, both of them are both called Alex. They both don't know what they're talking about.
And the way it's been done is by invoking this concept of contempt of Parliament in this particular way. And I haven't used.
If you read the report, which this guy don't think clearly has, the committee actually lays out what contempt of Parliament is, of the definition, and then states why Boris Johnson is committing contempt of Parliament. We went over that in that live stream where we went over that report. This guy clearly hasn't read the report.
You have to go back to the 17th century for a time when that was taken seriously. But by invoking it in this kind of way, what they're also.
One, we'd have to go back to the 17th century to see examples of where contempt of Parliament was taken seriously.
So starting to do is to police what MPs say in the House of Commons. Now, the British tradition.
He's going to talk about MP privilege, which is fine. But what MPs are expected to do, if they misquote someone, if they say some facts wrong, you are expected, it's in the rules of someone who is a member of parliament, you are expected to correct the record at your earliest opportunity. This is not a chilling effect on parliament that this guy is saying that is happening. No, because they are not criticizing the privilege committee. They are not saying something, example that the privilege committee is wrong in this example. No, they're going out of their way to say that the privilege committee was a kangaroo court, which is very politically charged language, to say that this entire thing was a stitch up, and it wasn't. This privilege committee was perfect. I would love to take this guy on with have an absolute discussion about this, about why this, because I'll tell you now, I will open up the whole thing and we can go through it part by part, because he has no clue what he's talking about. I don't think he's even read the report, to be honest. He's got no idea what he's talking about, but he's about to make the whole free speech argument. No, this isn't a free speech argument. Boris Johnson lied to the House of Parliament, and he did so, from what we can say from the report, did so deliberately, lied about parties happening, lied to the committee when he was giving evidence saying that there were no more parties happened. He lied about then lying. He then lied about correcting the record. He just lied. And at some point, you've got to go, well, that's not acceptable in our political system, where, again, MPs are expected. Even if you say something unknowing that was wrong, let's say you came forward and you said something like that the EU produced like 20%, I don't know, microchips or something like that. You would be expected, if someone challenged you on that and said, oh, actually, no, that's wrong, you would be expected to go back and correct the record at your earliest opportunity. And Boris Johnson chose not to do that, even when invited to do so by one of the people on the committee when he was giving evidence.
Is that anything an MP says in the House of Commons is covered by privilege. MPs are free to say anything they wish and anything they think.
Not true. Not true. You cannot just say anything you want in Parliament. That's not true. Because again, what if you give out false information? Again, you are expected to correct the record. Not only that, I think the Speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, would have a lot to say when it comes to something like this.
Not any longer, it would seem. The political class is able to control what they say, just as it's trying to control what everybody.
Oh my God, this you can see where this is coming from. Oh, you don't understand. The political class is just trying to control now what MPs are saying. MPs can't say what they want. They're not allowed to accuse a committee that was set up by Parliament and accuse it of being a kangaroo court. But this goes even deeper than this, because this report showed just how much of a liar Boris Johnson was, and lying deliberately to mislead the House. That should not be tolerated. And committees like this are just a fact of our democracy. This is how our democracy works. And yet these two buffoons are just saying, oh, this is just 1984.
Everybody else has outside Parliament too. We are moving a step away every time with every one of these scandals, a step away from a situation where we have open debate, open speech, free speech, an open democratic political system. We're moving ever more closely, ever more rapidly into one that is increasingly controlled. And if you think that this is
No, they. I cannot believe he's making this argument. This is just so dumb. This is just so. In fact, I'm not going to even bother with the rest of the video because, to be honest, I don't. I think I'm wasting my time covering any more of that video. I'm not even gonna dignify finishing the rest of this video because, to be honest, if he thinks that this privilege committee report into the House, into again, Boris Johnson lying, committing contempt of Parliament, undermining the democratic process by instead of making a response back to the privilege committee after they'd seen his report, because again, Boris Johnson would have had an opportunity to respond. That's how the process worked. Instead, he went to the press and basically said this is what was in the report before the report had even been published, which is again contempt. And then he lied and lied and lied and committed contempt again and again, misled the House. This is not chilling MPs' freedom of speech at all. This is not happening. What he said was let me give you what has really happened here. Boris Johnson, known liar. Yeah, again, the guys, isn't that so funny? We had an entire committee wasting their time to say that Boris Johnson was a liar. No, it's more serious than that. Boris Johnson misled the House. And then he lied about that, and then lied about correcting the record, and then he attacked the privilege committee. Well, not physically, but verbally, which is again undermining the very democratic system you apparently care so much about. It is not creating a chilling effect on free speech. These two guys and this guy Alexander, whatever, he doesn't know the first thing I think he's talking about. The idea that this takes the electorate out of the decision. No, the electorate of Uxbridge would have had a choice. Do you want to continue with Boris Johnson as your MP or not? Here's some other options you might like. I've said it and I will say it before, and I'll finish the video by saying this. This channel is not a serious place for politics. These guys have no idea about the thing that they're talking about. They have no idea about the privilege committee. They are using it to try and say that, oh, look, the UK is being taken over by some sort of political deep state stuff. To be honest, I don't even have to finish the video because I know that's the direction that they're going in. If the guys at the Durham want to take me on at any point and challenge me on this, then fine. We'll go over. We'll go on stream. We'll open up the privilege committee report and we will go over it. But I doubt that happened because they don't really want to be challenged. I think they'd rather just stay in their echo chamber, and be not challenged and make ridiculous conspiracy theories that this. Yeah. I've had my fun with this video, but some of these arguments that the guy was making were just complete, absolute nonsense from the start. Absolute sheer nonsense. So don't go to the Durham. They are engaged in, once again, as we said all the time about these guys, fantasy politics. So yeah, I think that's the best thing to say about these two guys. They're engaged in just, well, pure nonsense. But as always, thank you very much for joining us today. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.